What if discipline wasn't something you had to force, but something your brain could crave? What if the same way we get hooked on scrolling or junk food, we could get hooked on habits that actually build us? You've probably tried to be more disciplined before. Maybe you made a plan, downloaded an app, told yourself, "This time I'll stick with it." And maybe it worked for a few days, but then life happened. You got tired, bored, distracted, and before you knew it, you were back to square one. But here's the question I want you to consider today. Most people try to change their behavior through willpower, but the brain doesn't work that way. The brain doesn't follow commands, it follows rewards. What if the real problem isn't that you're weak or lazy or inconsistent, but that you've been trying to win a mental battle using the wrong rules? Every habit you've struggled to break, every routine you've failed to stick to, wasn't a failure of discipline. It was a misalignment of incentives, and unless you understand how your brain really works, how it chases pleasure, avoids pain, and automates anything that feels safe or familiar, you'll keep trying to force discipline instead of training it. See, the most disciplined people in the world aren't constantly pushing themselves with heroic effort. They've simply tricked their brains into liking what's good for them. They've rewired the reward system, and that's what we're going to do here, not through empty motivation, but through strategies backed by psychology, behavioral science, and most importantly, daily experience. You'll learn how to make the hard things feel good, how to lower the resistance to starting, how to attach tiny rewards to effort so your brain starts craving the work instead of dreading it. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand that discipline isn't a personality trait you were born without. It's a system anyone can build if they understand how to play the game. So if you've ever felt like your potential is being blocked by your own patterns, if you've ever wanted to finally break through and stay consistent without burning out, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Reward the rep now. The reason your brain resists discipline isn't because discipline is painful, it's because it's unrewarded. Think about it. When you scroll on your phone, eat something sweet or binge a show, your brain gets an immediate payoff. It learns, I do this. I feel good. But when you study, train, build, create, the reward is delayed. The satisfaction is distant. You don't get dopamine now, you get it later, maybe. That's not how the brain is wired to work. It wants a win now. That's why most self-improvement plans fail. Because we ask the brain to push through discomfort without any reinforcement, without any celebration, without even a signal that says, this was worth it. And slowly, silently, the brain learns, this isn't safe. This isn't fun. Let's avoid it. But what if you flipped that script? What if every time you did a hard rep, opened the laptop, started the workout, cleaned a single drawer, you gave your brain a tiny hit of something it liked? Not a bribe, a trigger, a reward, something so small it feels silly, but so effective it builds trust. You can pair the habit with a specific reward, a great coffee, a favorite song, a physical checkmark, or just a mental phrase like, yes, that's me now. You're teaching your brain a new association. Effort equals pleasure, not punishment. There's a reason elite athletes don't just train hard. They anchor the routine to rituals they love. There's a reason some of the most productive creators listen to the same playlist when they work. It's not magic, it's neuroscience. They're linking effort with enjoyment. It's behavioral conditioning. The same way a dog learns to sit for a treat, your mind can learn to crave discipline if it's followed by something that feels good. And once that connection is made, the resistance melts. Starting becomes easier. Repetition becomes lighter. Because here's the truth. Most people quit not because the task was too hard, but because it felt too empty. There was no emotional yes at the end. Just silence. No feedback. No cue that the brain could latch onto and say, "This is who we are now." That's what you're going to give yourself from this moment forward. A signal, a rhythm, a win. Every time you do the rep, reward the rep. Let your brain know, this is valuable. This is who I am. This is worth repeating. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be consistent. If you do the work and follow it with something pleasant, every time, the brain starts chasing the work instead of avoiding it. And that's when discipline stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like momentum. Lesson 2. Shrink the start. Most of the time, the hardest part isn't the work. It's starting the work. You know that feeling. You look at the task, the workout, the blank page, the to-do list, and your brain immediately throws up a wall. It says, "Not now." Too much. Too heavy. Later, and that word, later, becomes a graveyard for your dreams. Because every time you delay, you train your nervous system to associate beginnings with overwhelm. You turn action into a threat. And over time, just the thought of starting becomes emotionally exhausting. So here's the shift. Don't start big. Start tiny. Start embarrassingly small. Open the document. Put your shoes by the door. Send the first message. Just 2 minutes. That's the rule. Because once you're in motion, something powerful happens. Resistance loses its grip. Momentum kicks in. The brain stops anticipating discomfort and starts adapting to action. This isn't about tricking yourself. It's about building psychological safety. The smaller the entry point, the lower the threat. And when there's no threat, the mind stops avoiding. Starting becomes neutral, and in many cases, enjoyable. That's the key. You're not trying to become a machine that crushes 8-hour work blocks. You're trying to become a person who begins easily and often, because those are the people who win. Let me give you a real example. Imagine someone who hasn't written anything in months. Every time they sit down, they freeze. The inner critic is loud. The blank page feels like a monster. So they try something different. No goal, no pressure. Just one sentence. That's it. They sit down, open the doc, and type a single line. And because it feels safe, they stay a little longer. The next day they do the same. 2 lines, then 3. By week 2, they're writing a full paragraph without even noticing. That's the power of shrinking the start. The brain relearns, this isn't dangerous. This is doable. This applies to everything. The gym, reading, studying, calling someone. You make the first step so small, it becomes undeniable. And once you move, you build momentum. And once you build momentum, motivation shows up. Not the other way around. Most people wait for motivation to start. But motivation follows motion, and motion follows safety. So from now on, whenever your brain says too much, your response is simple. What's the 2-minute version? What's the lightest lift I can make right now? Because once you start, you're no longer thinking about doing the thing. You're inside the thing. And that's where transformation lives. Not in giant leaps, but in small, repeatable initiations. This is how you rebuild trust with yourself. Not by making huge promises, but by making small starts and keeping them, day after day. Lesson 3. Bundle it with pleasure. There's a myth we've all absorbed that discipline means suffering, that if it feels good, it's not real work. But that mindset is poison. It creates a split in your brain, one part that wants progress and another part that dreads it. And that tension becomes unbearable. You wake up each day knowing what you should do, but emotionally, your system rebels. It says, "This hurts. Let's run." That's not laziness. That's biology. Because your brain isn't wired to chase pain. It's wired to chase pleasure. And if the only pleasure it finds is outside your goals, in distractions, comfort or escape, guess what it'll keep choosing? But what if you stopped fighting that wiring and started using it? This is where the power of bundling comes in. You take a behavior you want to build, working out, cleaning, studying, creating, and you attach it to something you already enjoy. You stack the hard thing with something that lights up your brain's reward system, and suddenly the resistance fades. Because the task isn't just discipline anymore, it's dopamine. Simple examples: only watch your favorite show while doing light cardio. Only listen to that podcast when you're cleaning. Only sip that amazing coffee when you're deep in your writing session. The task becomes a trigger for pleasure, and pleasure becomes a magnet for consistency. It's called temptation bundling, and it's one of the most underused tools in habit formation. The science is clear. When effort and enjoyment are paired, adherence skyrockets. Because you're no longer pushing yourself against desire, you're moving with it. This isn't a cheat code. It's neuro-alignment. It's acknowledging that your brain is a survival machine, not a martyr. It needs cues, signals, incentives. And when it sees that effort leads to some kind of pleasure, whether physical, emotional, or even just a soothing rhythm, it stops resisting. It starts craving. It begins to associate discipline with a kind of joy, a kind of flow. And here's the twist. Over time, the pleasure you bundled becomes less important because the work itself starts to feel good. You train the brain to find satisfaction in the motion, in the doing. But to get there, you have to get past the wall, and bundling is how you climb it. So ask yourself right now, what's one habit you're trying to build, and what's one pleasure you can pair with it? Make it specific, make it immediate, and make it a rule. This joy only happens when I show up. That's how you train your system. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with smart, loving, strategic alignment. This is how you make discipline feel like something you get to do, not something you have to endure. Lesson 4. Rig the room. Discipline doesn't start in your mind. It starts in your environment. Because no matter how strong your willpower feels today, if your surroundings are wired for distraction, guess what you'll do? You'll scroll. You'll delay. You'll drift. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Willpower is a resource. And like all resources, it gets depleted. The more choices you have to make, the more temptations you have to resist, the faster your discipline burns out. But here's the good news. Your environment can be rigged in your favor. You can make bad habits harder and good habits easier just by adjusting what's around you. It's not about controlling your behavior through force. It's about reducing the number of battles you have to fight in the first place. So start here. Friction. Add friction to the behaviors you want less of. Delete junk apps from your phone. Log out of your distraction portals. Turn off one-click purchases. Move your TV remote to another room. Create tiny obstacles that force a pause, a breath, a question. That moment of hesitation is gold. It gives your higher self a chance to wake up. Then do the opposite for what you want more of. Reduce friction. Make it effortless to do the right thing. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow. Want to hydrate? Put a full glass of water on your desk before bed. Want to work out in the morning? Lay your shoes out by the door tonight. Want to eat better? Chop veggies before you're hungry. It sounds simple, and it is, but that's why it works. Because the brain loves easy. And when the right choice becomes easier than the wrong one, discipline becomes automatic. This is how top performers operate. Not by relying on moment-to-moment motivation, but by designing environments that support action even when they don't feel like it. They don't leave their discipline up to chance. They set traps, systems, defaults, their space whispers. This is who we are here. And over time, the behavior follows the design. So look around right now, not at your habits, but at your habitat. What does your room say about your priorities? What do your browser tabs say about your goals? What does your calendar reflect about your values? Because your environment is either your teammate or your enemy. And if it's not helping you, it's hurting you. Discipline isn't about pushing harder, it's about removing resistance. Change the room, and you change the rhythm. Set it up once, and let the space do the reminding. Lesson 5. Identity first. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop trying to act disciplined, and start becoming the kind of person who is. Because behavior is fragile, but identity, that's durable, that's deep. It shapes how you see yourself and how you behave when no one's watching. And if your habits are constantly at war with your self-image, you'll sabotage yourself without even realizing it. Think about it. Every time you say, "I'm just not a disciplined person," your brain listens. Every time you joke, "I'm lazy," or "I always quit," it registers. And it builds a quiet case against your own potential. So when the alarm rings early, or the temptation hits, guess what wins? The identity you've been repeating. The one that says, "This isn't me." But identity isn't fixed. It's chosen. And it's built through evidence. Small, repeated proof. That's why this isn't about faking confidence or shouting affirmations in the mirror. It's about action. Tiny, daily action that confirms the kind of person you want to be. Say it out loud. "I'm the kind of person who keeps their word." Now, prove it once today. That's it. Not 10 times. Not a full transformation. Just once. Once becomes a story. A story becomes a pattern, and patterns become identity. This is the same principle that reshapes athletes, artists, founders, not just what they do, but how they see themselves. It's the shift from "I want to write" to "I'm a writer," from "I'm trying to eat healthy" to "I don't skip fuel," from "I should wake up early" to "I don't hit snooze." These aren't goals, these are identities, and once they lock in, the behaviors follow, not because you're forcing them, but because they feel true. That's what you're aiming for, truth. Not perfection, not pressure, just a deeper alignment between who you want to be and what you do when it's quiet. And here's the trick. You don't wait until you believe it. You act your way into belief. You plant seeds. You collect proof. Every checkbox, every representative, every time you do what your past self would have skipped, that's you writing a new story. And the more pages you fill, the more convincing it becomes, until one day you wake up and realize, this is just who I am now. So forget the guilt, forget the grand declarations. Just pick one identity that matters to you and do something today that supports it. Say it, act on it, repeat. The story will shift. And once your story shifts, your future becomes inevitable. Lesson 6. If-then cues. Let's be honest, motivation is inconsistent. You can feel fired up in the morning and drained by noon. You can make a plan and still break it. Because motivation depends on emotion, and emotion is unpredictable. But if you want to stay consistent, especially when your mood crashes, your energy dips, or life throws distractions at you. You need something more stable. You need rules. Simple, no debate, built-in responses. That's what if-then cues are. And they can change everything. Here's the idea. Instead of relying on hope I'll do the right thing, you design a rule in advance. If X happens, then I do Y. No negotiation, no mental debate, just action. You take the decision-making out of the moment and automate the response before the chaos begins. For example, if I feel the urge to scroll, then I stand up and set a 5-minute timer. If I'm anxious before a meeting, then I take 3 slow breaths and say one calming phrase. If I don't feel like writing, then I just open the document and type one sentence. These rules seem small, but they work like anchors. They give your brain structure, predictability, safety, because most discipline fails not from lack of effort, but from uncertainty. You feel uncomfortable and your brain panics. But with if-then cues, discomfort triggers clarity. You know what comes next, and that reduces resistance. Behavioral science calls this implementation intention. It's one of the most powerful tools in psychology. Why? Because it removes willpower from the equation. And when you don't need willpower, you preserve energy. You reduce friction. You become more reliable, more stable, more automatic. Think of it like training a guide dog in your mind. The dog doesn't argue with you, it just responds. The cue happens and the behavior kicks in. That's what you're building. A system of internal guide dogs. One for cravings, one for procrastination, one for fatigue. You name the cue and you define the move. Over time, your identity begins to trust itself. You become someone who responds well under pressure, who doesn't get derailed by distraction, who knows their own patterns and has a system to handle them. And here's the beauty of it. This isn't about being rigid, it's about being prepared. You don't need a rule for everything, just the most common traps, the ones that usually pull you off track. You name them, you rewire them, you turn them from weaknesses into launch points. So take 60 seconds right now. Think of one moment in your day where you usually slip, and write your if-then cue. Write it somewhere visible. Read it before that moment arrives. And when it comes, execute. Not because you feel like it, but because that's the rule. Discipline doesn't start with pressure. It starts with design. This is how you become dependable, even on your worst day. Lesson 7. Track tiny wins. Your brain doesn't believe what you plan. It believes what you prove. And every time you complete a task, no matter how small, you give your brain a data point that says, "We're doing this. We're making progress. We're becoming someone new." But if you don't track those wins, if you don't see them, they vanish. You forget how far you've come, and the brain, left without proof, slips back into the old identity. I always quit. I never follow through. That's why visual tracking is one of the most underrated tools in building discipline. It creates a loop of feedback, a signal, a rhythm. When you check a box, mark a day, fill in a square, you're not just measuring progress, you're reinforcing belief. It's a message to the nervous system. This matters. This is real. This is who I am now. And here's the key. The win has to be small. Not because small is all you're capable of, but because small is what builds momentum. Big goals are overwhelming, but a single check mark, that's achievable, that's clear, that's repeatable. And when you see those wins stack up day after day, a quiet pride starts to grow. The kind of pride that doesn't need applause. The kind that says, "I said I would, and I did." This is how disciplined people stay consistent, not because they're superhuman, but because they track their humanity, one action at a time. They don't wait for motivation to strike. They build streaks, and streaks become stories, and stories become identity. Want to read more? Track one page. Want to write daily? Track one sentence. Want to meditate? Track 2 minutes. You're not aiming for perfection, you're aiming for evidence. Something your brain can look at and say, we're becoming the kind of person who shows up. Some people use apps, others use journals. Some just put a sticky note on the wall. It doesn't matter what you use. What matters is that your effort becomes visible, because when progress is visible, it becomes magnetic. You want to keep the chain going. You want to feel that dopamine hit from doing what you said you would. And when you miss a day, you don't rip the whole page out. You don't burn the calendar. You breathe, and then you get back to the next box. That's the practice. You're not proving perfection, you're proving pattern. So here's the challenge. Pick one thing you want to be more consistent with and create a tiny win to track. 1 box per day, 1 dot, 1 line. And every time you see it, let it remind you, this is working. You're building something, you're becoming someone, and it's happening, not in the future, but now. Lesson 8. Pre-commit. You already know what throws you off. The late-night scrolling, the skipped workout, the project you avoid until it becomes a crisis. You've seen the pattern 100 times, and still, it keeps happening. Why? Because in the moment your brain doesn't care about your goals, it cares about comfort. It craves ease, and unless the decision has been made before the craving shows up, you'll break the promise to yourself. Not because you're weak, but because your system is built to avoid pain and preserve energy. That's why pre-commitment is essential. It's the art of locking in your decisions in advance, while your mind is clear, calm, and aligned with your long-term vision. You eliminate the negotiation window. You reduce the opportunity for sabotage. You build walls where there used to be escape routes. There are countless ways to do this. You can set timers on your devices, blocks that prevent you from accessing distraction when you're supposed to be focused. You can schedule a work sprint in your calendar and treat it like an unmissable meeting. You can make a public commitment to a friend. I'll send you my draft by 4 p.m. You can even put small stakes on the line, something minor, like sending them $5 if you don't follow through. Why? Because stakes activate seriousness. They make the decision real. Pre-commitment works because it leverages what behavioral scientists call present bias, the tendency to make short-term decisions at the expense of long-term goals. But when you pre-commit, you freeze the version of yourself that wants change, and let that version control the environment. It's like time-traveling your best self into your worst moments and letting them take the wheel. This isn't about punishment. It's about architecture. You're building a system that supports you when your motivation dips, a scaffolding that keeps your behavior aligned with your values, even when your emotions shift. Because they will. That's not failure. That's being human. Think of it like setting up bowling bumpers for your life. You know the lane you want to stay in. So instead of hoping you won't drift, you build guides, constraints, reminders, triggers. You don't wait to feel ready. You reduce the number of decisions you have to make when it matters most. So here's your move. Pick one behavior you've been inconsistent with and design a pre-commitment. Right now, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Maybe it's scheduling a 30-minute focus block with no notifications. Maybe it's telling someone your deadline. Maybe it's deleting an app until Friday. Whatever it is, lock it in. Make it easy to follow through and hard to back out. Discipline isn't about constantly pushing. It's about designing a life where showing up is the default, and pre-commitment makes that possible. Lesson 9. Protect energy. Discipline doesn't die in your schedule, it dies in your body. You don't skip the gym because you're lazy. You skip it because you're drained. You don't lose focus because you lack ambition. You lose it because your system is running on fumes. Fatigue turns giants into ghosts. And if you don't manage your energy, you won't have the fuel to do anything that matters. This is where most people get it wrong. They try to fix their habits without fixing their physiology. But your brain is not a floating mind. It's a physical organ. It runs on chemistry. And when your sleep is trash, your blood sugar is crashing and your stress is spiking. Your ability to stay focused, consistent and resilient collapses, no matter how much you want it. You've probably felt it yourself. On days when you're rested, fed and calm, discipline feels easy. You do the work without thinking. You feel proud, aligned. And on days when you're exhausted or foggy, even the smallest task feels like climbing a mountain. That's not mindset. That's biology. So if you want to become the kind of person who shows up daily, you don't just need better routines. You need to protect your energy source. You need to treat your body not like a slave to your ambition, but like the engine of it. That means sleep, real sleep. Not scrolling until 1 a.m. and wondering why you feel dead by noon. That means protein, not just sugar bursts that crash you mid-afternoon. That means light in the morning, movement throughout the day, and recovery built into your week. This isn't wellness advice, it's performance architecture. Because here's the secret, the most disciplined people are the ones who need the least willpower. Why? Because they're operating from a full tank. They don't waste effort resisting cravings, because the cravings are low. They don't white-knuckle through exhaustion, because they're rested. They don't spiral into chaos, because their system is grounded. And this is what separates temporary effort from long-term transformation. You don't just manage your time, you manage your capacity. You don't just push harder, you fuel smarter. And the moment you start honoring your body, your mind stops fighting you. It supports you. It partners with you. So if you've been falling off your habits lately, don't just ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What does my body need that I've been ignoring?" Then give it. Consistently. Kindly. Because discipline isn't about crushing yourself. It's about caring for yourself in a way that makes consistency inevitable. You're not just building habits. You're becoming the kind of person whose energy protects their mission. Lesson 10. One thing at a time. Let's clear something up. Multitasking is a lie. It doesn't make you faster. It doesn't make you more productive. It fractures your attention, weakens your focus, and kills your results. Because your brain isn't designed to juggle everything at once. It's designed to lock in, to narrow, to immerse. And yet we live in a world that rewards the opposite. Fast switching, tab hopping, inbox pinging. You've probably had those days. 10 tabs open, 5 apps running, bouncing from one unfinished task to another, feeling busy but never done. You go to bed exhausted and still feel like you accomplished nothing. That's not discipline. That's noise. But here's the shift. Simplicity builds power. And the most powerful thing you can give your mind is a single target. One clear outcome. One defined next move. Because when you remove all the static, your brain stops defending itself. It stops bracing against overload. And suddenly, it can perform. This is the practice. Close the tabs, clear the desk, mute the notifications, and ask yourself, what's the one thing that matters right now? Not 10 things, not a loose to-do list, just one mission, one next action. Name it, then do it. Fully. This is called single tasking, and it's a superpower, because the deeper you go into one thing, the more efficient you become. You build momentum, you finish faster, and most importantly, you train your brain to trust itself again, to stay, to focus, to complete. Think of it like weightlifting. If you try to lift 5 bars at once, you'll drop all of them. But if you grip one and put your full effort into that lift, you get stronger, and the strength you gain there carries over into every other area. But here's the challenge. Your brain will resist. It's addicted to variety. It gets a dopamine hit every time you switch tasks. So the first time you shut everything down to focus, it'll rebel. You'll feel restless, bored, uncomfortable. That's normal. That's withdrawal. But stay in it. Ride the wave. Because once your system adapts, the piece that follows is addictive. You'll start craving the clarity of single focus. And that craving fuels consistency. So tomorrow, when you sit down to work, don't just write a list. Choose a target. Say it out loud. This is my one thing, and don't move until you've touched it, nudged it forward, or finished it. One task, one track, one powerful mind. This is how you rebuild discipline, not with intensity, but with intention. Lesson 11. Progressive overload. Discipline, like muscle, doesn't grow by doing the same thing over and over. It grows by doing slightly more than you did yesterday, then recovering, adapting, and doing it again. This principle, borrowed from strength training, is called progressive overload, and it doesn't just apply to lifting weights. It applies to your habits, your mindset, your confidence, your entire self-mastery journey. The mistake most people make is all or nothing. They go from zero to burnout in a week. They try to overhaul their entire life overnight. Wake up at 5 a.m., journal, meditate, work out, fast, read, build a business, all on day one. But the nervous system can't handle that. It freaks out. And when the crash comes, and it always comes, they think they've failed. But they didn't fail. The strategy did. Real discipline is incremental, not heroic. It doesn't scream. It stacks. And that stack is slow, deliberate, and powerful. You build the habit, then you nudge it. You write for 10 minutes a day, then 15. You walk a mile, then a mile and a half. You do one focused work session a day, then 2. That 5% increase is everything. It keeps your system engaged, challenged, and growing without triggering overwhelm. But progressive overload isn't just about more. It's also about knowing when to pull back. Just like in training, you don't go hard every single day. You deload, you rest, you give your system time to recover and integrate. Because discipline isn't about always pushing. It's about knowing when to push and when to pause. That rhythm is what keeps you sustainable. Without it, you're chasing peaks instead of building a plateau you can stand on. This is how high performers stay consistent for years, not months. They respect the cycle. They don't mistake effort for identity. They use effort as a signal. Am I adapting? Am I growing? Am I doing slightly more or slightly better than I was last week? If the answer is yes, they keep going. If it's no, they assess, they refine, they rest, and then they return, stronger. So here's your practice. Pick one area you're growing in and ask, what's the next 5%? Not the next mountain, not the next transformation, just the next small increase. And when you hit a wall, don't panic. Deload. Don't quit the system. Adjust the intensity. Because consistency isn't about never missing. It's about always returning. Smarter, stronger, and more in tune with your limits. Remember this: discipline isn't about being superhuman, it's about being strategic. You grow by volume, not by drama. And that quiet increase, that slow, steady pressure, that's where your power is forged. Lesson 12. Miss fast, reset faster. No matter how smart your system is, no matter how dialed in your habits are, you will slip. You will miss a workout. You'll break a streak. You'll scroll too long, sleep in, binge, skip, snap. It's inevitable. You're not a machine. You're human. But the difference between people who stay disciplined and people who stay stuck is what happens after the miss. Most people spiral. One mistake turns into a story. I messed up, therefore I'm a mess. They attach their identity to the lapse, and that guilt, that shame, that inner judgment. It doesn't build discipline, it kills it. Because the brain, now flooded with emotion, loses clarity. And instead of correcting the system, it starts questioning the self. What's wrong with me? But high performers, the ones who stay consistent long-term, treat every miss as data, not failure, not identity, just feedback. They don't deny it, they don't wallow in it, they observe it, then they adjust. They ask better questions. What led to this? Where was the friction? What system broke down? Then they repair, and they return. This is the golden rule: never miss twice. Once is noise, twice is a pattern, 3 times becomes a groove. That's why speed matters. Not speed of success, but speed of recovery. The faster you forgive, reorient, and re-engage, the faster you regain momentum, because the longer you wait, the heavier it feels. The more your mind spins stories, and the more those stories bury your identity. So here's what you do. The moment you slip, interrupt the spiral. Breathe. Zoom out. Say this out loud: I missed. I'm not broken. Let's reset. Then pick the smallest possible win and complete it. Right then. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. A 30-second task. One representative. One checkmark. Something that proves I'm back in motion. Because that tiny move, that's your comeback. That's the break in the chain of self-sabotage. And every time you do it, you strengthen the part of you that can recover faster. You become someone who doesn't disappear for weeks after a slip. You bounce, you recalibrate, you respond. This is the final lesson, and maybe the most important one. Discipline isn't perfection. It's resilience. It's how quickly you can return to the path when life knocks you sideways. It's not how many days you never miss. It's how many days you refuse to quit. And the moment you make this shift, from guilt to feedback, from punishment to pattern recognition, you unlock something bigger than discipline. You unlock trust. The kind of trust that says, even when I fall, I know how to rise. That's how discipline becomes your nature. Not because you never stumble, but because you always stand back up. If you're ready to make this real, start today. What's one area where you've slipped recently? Don't overthink. Just reset. Fast, gentle, clear. One small win. Then repeat tomorrow. That's how it begins.